Welcome back. In Module 4, I'll attempt to provide an overview of just some basic findings and best practices from the field of social media research dissemination. What is the extent to which tweeting about scientific papers signifies engagement with, attention to, or the consumption of scientific literature? Now, using Twitter from the field of dentistry, Robinson, Garcia, and colleagues examined the role that Twitter plays in scholarly communication and the potential value of tweet counts as traces of broader engagement with the scientific literature. Their findings were unsurprising. According to the study, and I quote, "The ideal that tweeting about scholarly articles represents curating and informing about state-of-the-art appears to not be realized in practice. We see much presumably human tweeting almost entirely mechanical and devoid of original thought, no evidence of conversation, tweets generated by monomania, duplicate tweeting from many accounts under centralized professional management, and tweets generated by bots. Some accounts exemplify the ideal, but they represent less than 10% of the tweets." Our work at the Social Media Research Dissemination Initiative has actually shown very similar patterns. For example, here's the Twitter account for the National Institute for Health Research based in the United Kingdom. They have a Twitter account named NIHR Dissemination, and as you can see, its tagline reads, "We help hashtag NHS, hashtag public health, and hashtag social care professionals and patients make evidence-based healthcare decisions with research from official NIHR and others." Now, our analysis showed that despite having over 23,000 followers, the account had only 2 tweets with over 100 likes or retweets in the past 30 days. This means or indicates that very little social interaction is happening on the part of this account, a pattern consistent with the Robinson-Garcia findings from dentistry. There's something called the Altmetrics manifesto, which is linked in the link is provided in the course syllabus. This online decree centers on the growth of new online scholarly tools that allow researchers and data scientists to make new filters to help them make sense of the scholarly literature. You can kind of summarize this process into these 4 categories. There's the usage or kind of the consumption on the part of audiences who are downloading or viewing web or digital content. There's a peer review process, which is similar to what you see in classic sort of peer review, where experts in the field are able to weigh in. Citations, and then the Altmetrics world sort of involves the storage of links and bookmarks and conversations, an alternative way of measuring the actual imprint or impact, if you will, of scholarly information in the digital realm. According to this manifesto, peer review is slowly beginning to beginning to show its age. And measures like citation counting and the journal impact factor, or JIF, just aren't enough. On the other hand, scholars are increasingly moving their work to the web and to digital databases like Zotero and Mendeley, which claim a combined 80 million articles, which makes them way bigger than PubMed, for example. With Altmetrics, we can crowdsource peer review. Instead of waiting months for 2 opinions, an article's impact might be assessed by thousands of conversations and bookmarks in a week. Because Altmetrics are themselves diverse, they're great for measuring impact in this diverse scholarly ecosystem. In fact, Altmetrics will be essential to shift these new forms since they're from outside the scope of traditional filters. This diversity can also help in measuring the aggregate impact of the research enterprise itself. Altmetrics are fast, using public APIs to gather data in days or weeks. They're open, not just the data, but the scripts and algorithms that collect and interpret it. Altmetrics look beyond counting and emphasize semantic content like usernames, timestamps, and tags. Altmetrics aren't citations, nor are they webometrics. Although these latter approaches are related to Altmetrics, they're relatively slow, unstructured, and closed. So this raises a good sort of general question that unfortunately, I don't think there's a very good answer to, which is how many scholars are actually on social media today. This is a tough one, and the Altmetrics manifesto gives an estimate. It claims that as many as a third of all scholars are on Twitter today. But we've been unable to verify this estimate. But in my lab, we're working on compiling a database of Twitter users in the health, equity, and related fields, but it's just too early for any real guesses at this point. An interesting question, perhaps even more important than how many scholars are there currently on social media, is how much impact can social media actually have? Here's an image that I was first introduced to in Aaron Frocht and Aaron Carroll's presentation at an earlier IRL meeting. In their presentation titled From Academic Journals to the New York Times, Getting People to Pay Attention to Research. And it just shows a tweet from Michael McWilliams, and you can see the causal effective page views on Harvard Economist tweet linking to an article 4 months after publication. So that data trend is very clear, right? Almost nothing happening up until the tweet, at which point you see a very noticeable spike in attention online, folks who are all of a sudden checking for that article. One of the earliest published studies focusing on Twitter specifically is Scanfield, and Larson, and a study published in 2010. They conducted a very early but important cross-sectional survey using content analysis of Twitter status updates between March 2009 and July 2009. This is right when Twitter was first born. They categorized approximately 1,000 tweets into 11 categories of reference to the term antibiotic. A little bit later, Eisenbach conducted a study in 2011 at the University Health Network Center for Global eHealth Innovation and Techna Institute in Toronto, examining whether or not tweets could predict citations. Sure enough, they found that they could. Between 2008 and 2011, all tweets containing links to articles in the Journal of Medical Internet Research were mined. They mined about 1,500 tweets, about 55 articles, and collected different metrics from social media impact, and they were calculated and compared against subsequent citation data from places like Google Scholar 17 to 29 months later. Almost 5,000 tweets cited almost 300 distinct JMIR articles. And what they found was that most tweets were sent on the day an article was actually published or on the following day, which is followed by a very rapid decay. So in general, what you see from that study is a pattern that kind of reflects this issue or this general data trend indicated by this slide, which is no real attention until a blip on social media draws attention from the digital or online world to a particular piece of scholarly information and research. And then you see the resulting spike, but then an equally sort of dramatic decline once people sort of turn away. This actually, I would argue, is not the best way to conceptualize social media research dissemination. The goal, in our view, is more about creating, again, a social sort of context, a literal dialogue amongst or between people who are in the social realm about any given particular idea. So as opposed to taking a journal article or a reference or a book chapter or something to that effect and going to the social media verse and saying, hey, here's something for everyone to check out, the dissemination process indicated by social media research dissemination is one that developmentally allows, encourages, and motivates individuals to think about the research in social ways. So what were so to answer the question of what is the impact that social media can have on research, I'm not sure is actually currently being evaluated in that context. Again, the view is that to take research and put it onto social media is not the same as social media research dissemination. Social media research dissemination involves a social element to the research itself. So there are some really quality resources that are available for researchers who are interested in, for example, implementation science. For example, the Implementation Science Exchange is a free online source for those interested in resources to help design, acquire funding for, execute, and disseminate implementation science research projects. Here's a quick cut to the Implementation Science's Twitter pages in that field itself. Somewhat of a darker side, if you will, has also been raised by researchers when we think about what are the stakes for the research community's ability to effectively bring or merge those two worlds of research and social media. Ndume, Iyo, and Mazuko published a study in 2016 entitled Social Media, Knowledge Transition and Action on the Social Determinants of Health and Health Equity, a survey of public health practices. The National Collaborating Center for Determinants of Health at St. Francis Xavier University conducted a survey during the first half of 2016 to assess how public health used social media for knowledge translation, relationship building, and specific public health roles to advance health equity. So here, again, the emphasis is on how does the conduct and the process of the research actually affect affect our understanding of those social determinants of health. Respondents reported that social media had an important role in public health. Uptake of social media, while relatively high for personal use, was less present in professional settings and varied for different platforms. Over 20% of those surveyed used Twitter or Facebook at least weekly for knowledge exchange. A lesser number used social media for specific health equity action. Opportunities to enhance the use of social media in public health persist. Brownson and colleagues examined how new approaches for disseminating public health science and highlight a deadly research practice gap. Our inability, and I quote, "Our inability or unwillingness to apply what is known to improve health results in significant health deficits and persistent inequalities. For example, it is estimated that the lives of 6 million children could be saved each year if 23 proven interventions were implemented in 42 countries." End quote. Now, this requires us to pause. What we see is that not only does the social and social media research dissemination help the researcher further their aims and their agenda, and as we'll see coming up in a later module, make our research more likely to get funded and increase its impact across different sectors. But researchers have a public responsibility to get the information that's already been gleaned from science out to the literal world of children and families and communities that are suffering needlessly because they haven't had access to proven techniques and interventions that can literally save lives. They go on to state, Brownson and colleagues, they go on to state that the percentage of U.S. adults who use at least one social media tool has grown from near 0%, basically 0% in 2005 to 69% in 2016, and that there's little difference in social media use by race, ethnicity, sex, income, education, or community type. Scientists and publishers of scientific journals are beginning to recognize the potential of social media for disseminating science to the public. However, one study found that only 15% of health researchers use social media as a dissemination tool. So just as a matter of, in broad strokes, if we're talking about a general or sort of collective goal of the field to increase health outcomes, or as in the case with RWJF, to build a culture of health, it's alarming that only about 15% of individuals actively engaged in that work are leveraging or engaged in the single most, what has been referred to as the most ubiquitous technological phenomenon in the history of the world, that being social media. Of the 100 most covered 2016 journal articles, health studies were discussed on social media more than any other science topic. Twitter was the most active platform for disseminating the top articles with more than 1,000 tweets per article, followed by online news stories, Facebook, and blogs. Social media dissemination is significantly positively associated with more downloads and eventual citations. However, it's unclear, again, whether tweeting science influences or is merely correlated with citations. Thanks for watching this module. See you in Module 5, where we'll hear a tale of two Twitters.